In this video help, what we're going to be doing is we're going to do a little recap here to start with. In the popover screens, we created some equipment in the equipment screen, and that has its own records in the equipment screen. For example, these are the 4 records it has right now. Some of these are status types, other ones are actual equipment that could be rented out. In this case, I was just using some test data. What you want to do is go to the equipment records that are currently available and overwrite those by changing the data. You can go right into the portal or go into the actual equipment listing by clicking here, go to the equipment, and then modify, not these things that are like deposit and late payments. Those are items that are actually going to stay in the system. There are other types that you don't use the records in here, like you don't have a rating or anything like that. So let's go back to the booking list. We already added 4 items, we said. Now we're going to go ahead and assign those. Now I already created some assignments in record number 1, where I took John Smith, which is the John Smith over here in the record, and I put in a test lighting item by serial number. They shouldn't be the same serial numbers, but in fact, if you wanted to change them, you can go into the equipment record and modify that to have a different number. You shouldn't change those in here. Change them in the equipment record itself. You do not have to mess with these 2 fields because it's taking data directly from the client record in the booking. Now, when you add a new item, say like this John's going to come in and he wants to have this thing for X number of days or weeks or whatever, you would click in here and pick from the drop-down list. Of course, there's 4 items in there. It would have to be something that actually has a rentable capability. In this case, it'd be test lighting. It'd be any kind of lighting, I guess. But basically, we showed it as rented, and it was rented on this date, 5/14. And then if we put the time in for when it was rented, and then put in a return date, it'll automatically calculate the number of days based on these 2 dates that I have in here. There would be a return time that would be set up for here, and in this case, if it's a 24-hour time clock that's running and it's after 9 a.m. and you came in at 11, you have the option to charge him for the extra time for a late fee, and the late fee was actually one of the items that's listed in here in the equipment: late return fee, other fees. So what you could do is in the billing screen, use that in the drop down over here as an item from the equipment list, which is a other type of item, and go ahead and bill him for the late time, whatever that might be, a portion of time or a whole day or whatever, depending on how you run your business. Okay, now as far as the records are concerned, in this there is a date modified. Date modified is anytime you edit these fields in here, it's going to automatically change this date to the last time it was actually modified. The last item for this record is the client. Now this particular information is used in the client portal, and it's used in the calendar, and I'm going to explain what that is later, but right now I'm just going to go ahead and click on the portal, and I want to indicate something when you're doing work in there. When you're working on this, you want to go ahead and verify anything you want to do in here as far as the record's concerned. If you needed to delete the record because you started to do a appointment or whatever for this particular assignment, and it fell flat because somebody didn't come in or changed their mind, you could delete that record and it would take it out of the records in the equipment assignment. Whatever you do, make sure that when you click here that you're going to take you back to the assignment. If for some reason you click this record, it's going to take you to a screen we don't want to go to, and I'm going to explain that later. It actually goes to well, let's go ahead and click and I'll show you what I'm talking about. It'll bring it into this screen, and test lighting is shown as one of the items that is in the billing as far as an appointment. But in order to use this, you have to go back and create the appointment, and you cannot do it in this screen. You would go back and pick that item as an appointment item from that particular client, which is John Smith. And the way you do that is you would add the customer name up here from the drop down, and in this case you can't create that in here. You have to do it in the actual record. So I'm going to go back over here and show you that I'm back in this screen, and if I'm going to go to the calendar, I navigate here, click on daily calendar, and it'll open up the calendar. Now we're going to be covering that separate as a separate item in a different video. Okay, let's go back over and make sure that we go back in, or just click here to go back into the screen for that client. Okay, the assignment, equipment assignment has an extra couple of screens that are related to it. For example, there's an equipment listing that is from the engineering list. As far as the items and the equipment that you've added. There's an equipment work order, which is a portion of the actual equipment screen. There's a long invoice that might be related to it. And we're going to be talking about payments. And that has it over here for payment and client stuff. We'll be looking at in the next video. In the booking, there's an equipment assignment portal. That's the portal that we just left. And in this case, let's see if there's anything else that's important. Equipment assignment report. This is the report that shows all of the equipment that is assigned. And in this particular case, it is by the ID number. And as it says up at the top, it's an equipment assignment report. In this case, it's by the ID number. And what you would do in this screen, if you wanted to find a particular client by his ID number and see the equipment that he had in the report, and all the information that is in the report as far as the things that you want to know about as far as that client, you would go ahead and use this particular report to do that. And you would start a find by clicking find, then go in and add whatever you want to as far as the item that you want to look at. Now, do I want to see every one of these, or do I want to see something over a date span? If I want to do a date span, you can go in and you do in this case, I can copy this particular information, but it's not, you have to do it in find mode, or add it in find mode. It's the date that it was rented and the dates that it's returned, and you would put in those date spans, or you would put a date span in that has on the other side of it in the find, it would have greater than or equal to on this side of the 5, and then equal to, less than, or equal to, and have another date. And what that would do is it would look through all the records that fit that, but then you would also pick ID number 1 if you want to see everything for that period for ID 1. And if you need help on this, I'll explain it a little. If you need to contact me, and I'll break it down even further. But basically what you're doing is you're picking in a find the booking ID and the date span for the items within that date period. So, or you can use John Smith. You could pick him in this thing and go ahead and use that and put a date range in. It's up to you how you want to do that. But it's very fluent to be able to do that kind of stuff. And obviously you can use any field in here that you can edit in the when you're doing a find. Now if I want to go back and say, for example, I did a find, you want to click this button where it says Run Report, and what it's going to do, it's going to add the header back up in the top of this so that you'll have that header information once you've completed the find. And one of the other things we can do in here to show you is I had talked before about using the omit, and we probably can do this in a couple of different things. I can go down here and I can say, I can highlight the field, any field I can get into like John Smith, and I can say omit that record. And what it does, it omits that record. And now if I go back up and say, oh, I only want to see the omitted ones, now that's the one that was omitted. And you can see that it took the header out. Click Run Report, and it puts the header back in again. So you can maneuver around through these different reports and do these kinds of things. Now, reports have different kinds of data in their fields depending on which one you go to. For example, we did the equipment assignment report here. We may want to go and do for example, equipment service report. And if I go to equipment service report, in this case, it's not a report, it's a portal. So you can see how the equipment has a service portal. And for example, let's go over here and say the equipment work order. Those are the work orders. Now here's another example where you have, in this particular screen, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say, show all records. If there were not all the records in here, because there's only one showing now, it would show all the records, so I'd have the pick of choice of those items that I wanted to see. You're looking at the equipment, you're seeing up here at the top, this is going to show for this item for all the different times that the actual item had a work order done on it. It's going to show you the expense and a summary of all the labor and total things as far as materials and labor. And that way you would know what this thing actually had for a service report as far as the schedule of actual service work hours. You can also use a date in a find, or the service due date, or the service from date to due date, which calculated the 30-day span. Or you can actually look at different kinds of descriptions and actually go in. I want to see everything that had a lube and it would show up everything in a find that had a lube, and it would not care about what service work order you were working in. Or you can do a search based on the work order. So that's the kind of things you can do in a search. Let's go back, and it goes back into the equipment based on the item that we want to look for. You can do a search in here if you're looking for a specific thing, but in this case, you would have to have a work order in there in order to find it. Now, if you're looking for work orders, first of all, I'd have to have one here. I'm going to do a little quick thing here. I'm going to go back and I'm going to say I want to go to the first record. Let's go to the next record because the first record's not going to work. Let's say last. Nope. Yeah, that's lighting. So in this case, it's got the initial serial number, and there's no work orders in here, so you would have to find something that had a work order and to find that particular work order. And that would probably be in there. Now let's go back to the booking records. So that does the things that you can do in the equipment assignment, and later on we'll go back in and we'll pick up on some of the items that are in the menu navigation, and we'll explain how to use those other screens. For the time being, we're going to stop here on equipment assignment. The next thing we're going to do is the user-defined fields and the client billing and payment. Okay, we'll see you on the next video.